Have you ever stopped, like really stopped, to think about how interconnected everything is? Our lives, I mean, from, the really personal stuff, relationships, family, right up to, well, global politics. It all feels kind of woven together.
It definitely does, like this giant invisible web.
Exactly. And what's pulling all those threads together?
Information, right?
Always information. It's flowing constantly. Sometimes it's digital, zipping across the internet.
Other times it's just, well, gossip.
Okay.
Things people say.
Yeah, word of mouth. And all of it, it shapes how we see things, what we believe. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. And look, that's what this deep dive is all about today. We're exploring that very thing.
We are. Because we're in this age where data isn't just sitting there anymore. It's active. It influences court cases, how societies view truth, even basic trust in institutions.
So for you listening, we want to kind of pull back the curtain on that dance between information, tech, and just human experience. And the sources we're drawing from today, they're fascinating. Really raw conversations, unfiltered insights from different people.
Yeah, not polished reports, real voices talking about, well, a huge range of things.
It's quite the mix. We've got, the fallout from a really messy divorce.
Intense stuff, legal battles, emotional turmoil.
Then there's the whole world of online communication, those kind of hidden currents.
And how they spill over into real life.
Definitely. Plus, we touch on government actions, some pretty complex and, frankly, confusing stuff there.
And crucially for our focus today, the big one, hacking and technology, which is just constantly evolving, right? Sometimes in kind of scary ways.
Absolutely. So our mission really is to unpack all these different strands.
Find the important bits, the key takeaways.
And help you, our listener, connect the dots. See how things that seem separate are actually often linked.
We want to explore how tech isn't just a tool anymore. It's a player in personal fights, in shaping public opinion.
And it's definitely a battleground for privacy and security. A huge one.
So yeah, expect some surprises. Maybe some insights that make you look at your own digital world a bit differently.
It's not just about the tech specs of cyber threats. It's deeper. It's how technology is really fundamentally changing our reality. Yours, mine, everyone's.
Okay, let's dive in. Where should we start?
Let's start with that personal story. It's pretty shocking and really sets the stage for how tech and conflict intertwine.
Right, the divorce situation.
Yeah.
So our source, the wife, described this move by her husband, Nathaniel. She called it the ultimate Uno reverse card.
Which is quite a visual, so what happened?
Well, according to her, he started a fight, and then almost immediately afterwards went and got a PFA, a protection from abuse order.
Wow, okay. So that has immediate consequences.
Huge. It meant she was kicked out of the house, just like that. Ended up having to sleep in her car.
That's awful. It really shows how a legal tool meant for protection can be, well, potentially weaponized in a conflict. Creates immediate, drastic disruption.
And she suspects it was planned, premeditated.
How so? What made her think that?
Well, this detail is quite chilling. She mentioned a car alternator. Apparently, Nathaniel bought one 2 months before all this blew up.
2 months before?
Yeah. It's like she felt he knew her car was going to break down right when she'd be most vulnerable, right when she'd need it after being kicked out.
That suggests a level of, wow, calculated cruelty almost. Planning for her distress.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how far someone might go.
And this element of calculation, it seems to stretch into the digital side of things, too, which is really key here.
How did technology play into it?
She mentioned him using what she called reactive abuse, basically, provoking her to get a reaction.
Okay.
And then this is critical. He allegedly took away a specific phone, a phone she needed based on some prior understanding they had.
So cutting off communication.
Exactly. It seems like a deliberate move to isolate her, to control her access to information and support right when she needed it most. Taking away that phone wasn't just petty, it was strategic. Weaponizing digital access.
Right. And it connects to another point she made, his involvement with people online.
Ah, yes, the online dimension.
He apparently claimed he knew what they're saying about you online.
Yeah.
Which just adds this whole other layer of feeling targeted, undermined.
It really does. It shows how online chatter, or even just the threat of online gossip, can fuel real-world conflict. Makes you feel like you're being watched, judged, attacked from the shadows.
So back to the PFA for a second. She had some pretty strong views on how easy it was to get one, right?
She did. She basically said you can just walk in there and say a whole bunch of crap and they'll just give it to you. At least a temporary one.
Implying the bar is maybe too low initially.
That was her perspective. That while PFAs are crucial for genuine safety, the process for getting a temporary one might be open to exploitation and disputes, used as a tactic rather than just protection.
And the speed of it, get
Yeah.
kicked out almost immediately.
Yeah, she mentioned temporary ones might only last a couple of days usually, but hers was granted for a whole month, which made her feel the whole thing was uh, orchestrated,
Yeah.
manipulated.
It's a serious concern about process, for sure.
And it really feeds into this wider issue we see everywhere online. Gossip, hearsay, misinformation, just spreading.
She talked about local chat groups, right? For the neighborhood.
Exactly. Places where people tell lies and stuff, as she put it. She specifically mentioned mommy groups on Facebook.
Ah, yes. Those can be intense.
They can become gossip groups, she said, and get really toxic. And I think a lot of people can relate to seeing that happen in online communities. Anonymity, distance, it emboldens some people.
But the implication is bigger than just annoyance, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This online hearsay, these fake stories, they become weapons. They damage reputations. They influence real-world outcomes, like in her divorce case.
It creates a distorted reality.
Precisely. People spreading things without proof, building these narratives in digital echo chambers. It makes it incredibly hard to know what's true. It really sets the stage for how these alternative realities we hear about can actually form and take hold.
It's like the digital world isn't just reflecting conflict. It's amplifying it, twisting it.
Sometimes even creating it, with very real consequences for people's lives, their reputations, their legal situations. It's a powerful force.
Okay, so that's the personal level. But this blurring of lines, this challenge to truth, it doesn't stop there, does it? It seems to extend to our systems of governance, too.
It certainly does. Moving from the personal to the systemic, our sources painted a pretty unusual picture of Pennsylvania, for instance.
How so? What was unusual?
Well, one source described it as hyper-religious with some messed up laws.
Like what? Any examples?
Yeah, a specific one. A law apparently still on the books against tarot reading.
Tarot reading. Seriously, in this day and age.
Apparently so. Preventing women in places like Hanover from offering those services publicly.
Wow. That feels archaic, like regulating personal beliefs.
Exactly. It speaks to this deeper history, maybe an ongoing tendency towards social control, trying to dictate personal practices, spiritual beliefs. It feels invasive.
And this source felt this wasn't just historical, that she'd experienced it personally.
Very much so. She talked about being come at with this craziness since I was a kid. A long history of feeling targeted.
Targeted by who?
She specifically mentioned the Pennsylvania government and people digital with the government itself, targeting her, other women in her family. She even mentioned a recurring narrative about Jesus, attempts to impose certain beliefs.
That sounds like, well, state-sponsored harassment almost.
Yeah.
Especially the people digital with the government part, like traditional pressure amplified online.
That's the sense you get, this feeling of being watched, pressured, both offline and online, by official or quasi-official forces. It's quite a claim.
And it connects to this other thing she mentioned, Operation Safe Escape.
Right. An official-sounding name. But the weird thing was, she had no idea what it was.
Even though local officers were asking her about it, asking if she was connected to it.
Exactly. Which points to this disconnect, either between official programs and the public, or maybe something more targeted, like surveillance she wasn't meant to know about.
It definitely breeds mistrust, doesn't it? Especially if it involves digital surveillance or data collection that people aren't aware of.
Absolutely. How can you trust systems when you feel like things are happening behind the scenes, specifically targeting you or collecting data without transparency? It makes you question everything.
And that feeling of unease, that questioning of authority, it seems to broaden out when we look at certain government agencies, like ICE, for instance.
Yeah, that was a really stark point from the sources. The huge increase in the ICE budget.
Bigger than the FBI's budget, apparently.
That's what was claimed, leading to what the sources called extraordinary overkill in immigration enforcement. It just makes you ask, why? What's the goal behind that massive resource allocation?
And it wasn't just the budget, it was the alleged tactics, too.
Exactly. Really serious concerns were raised. Allegations of ICE agents operating without proper ID, without credentials.
Which makes it impossible to verify who they are.
Right.
Creates accountability issues.
Huge accountability issues. And then, even more disturbing, reports of agents allegedly assaulting and arresting members of Congress who were trying to inspect facilities.
Wait, arresting members of Congress?
That was the claim. It paints a picture of an agency potentially resisting oversight, operating with a lack of transparency, It fundamentally shakes your trust.
And the real-world danger of that lack of accountability.
It's terrifying. The sources pointed out the risk of criminals impersonating ICE agents.
Because if real agents don't have clear ID, how do you know who's who?
Precisely. It creates an opening for criminals to commit horrific crimes, rape, kidnapping, leveraging the fear and lack of identification associated with these alleged tactics.
That's incredibly chilling. When state authority seems unaccountable, it creates space for the worst kind of exploitation.
It really does. And this deep skepticism, it doesn't just stop with agencies like ICE. It extends to official information itself.
Like government statistics.
Yeah. Someone brought up a recent U.S. jobs report, saying it raised questions. You know the old saying, you can make statistics say anything.
So a general distrust of the data we're being given.
A deep distrust. And when people don't trust official data, what happens? They look elsewhere. Or they create their own narratives, their own truth.
Which get amplified online in those echo chambers we talked about.
Exactly. And then you end up with this fundamental breakdown in shared reality. If we can't even agree on basic facts because the official sources are questioned, how do we solve any problems together?
That leads us right into this really troubling idea of the battle for reality itself.
Yeah, the sources talked about this concept of people living in a completely different world.
Specifically mentioning Mago spaces, describing people almost like cult members with tortured logic. That's strong language.
It is strong language, and we need to be clear, we're reporting what the sources said, not endorsing that specific view. But it points to this idea of a fundamental split in how people see the world, not just disagreement, but like different realities, a huge chasm.
What did the sources suggest was driving that fragmentation?
One perspective offered was that for some political figures or movements, the primary driver isn't policy or truth, it's simply dominance. The need to win, to dominate the other side.
So information becomes a weapon in that fight. Truth is secondary to winning.
That's the implication. If the goal is just to own the libs or achieve total control, then facts that don't fit the narrative get discarded or twisted. Shared understanding just evaporates.
And that challenges the whole purpose of government, doesn't it?
It really does. The sources made this crucial distinction. Government, ideally, is supposed to serve the greater good, everyone.
Whereas a business exists to, well, make their stockholders money.
Right. And the concern raised was that these two purposes are getting dangerously conflated. Mixed up.
So, government starting to act more like a business, driven by profit or power or just partisan wins.
That's the fear. And if that happens, then all the tools government uses, including digital technology, the information it controls, they start serving those other goals, not the public good, which erodes trust even further. It could even impact national security if systems become dysfunctional.
Okay, this is a perfect pivot point then. Let's really drill down to the core of our deep dive. The digital frontier, hacking, security, communication, all that.
Absolutely. And our sources gave us a glimpse into the underbelly of cybersecurity, mentioning big conferences like Black Hat and DEF CON.
Right. These are major events where hackers, security pros, government folks all gather.
Yeah, they're not your average tech trade shows. It's where the cutting edge of vulnerability research and defense strategies gets discussed. One source even mentioned an invite to a Warlocks panel.
A Warlocks panel. Sounds intriguing.
At Michael Jackson's mansion, no less. It just gives you a sense of the kind of unique, maybe slightly clandestine culture around some parts of this world.
Okay, but here's where it got really specific and, honestly, a bit eye-opening about state-level capabilities. One of the panelists at this Warlocks thing.
Yeah. Who was it?
A former NSA director of TAO.
TAO, okay. Tailored Access Operations, that's significant.
Okay, explain that for people who might not know. What is TAO? It's not just defense, right?
No, definitely not just defense. As the source put it, TAO is the NSA's elite hacking unit. These are the people who hack the enemy here at Cyber Command. We're talking offensive cyber operations.
So breaking into adversary networks, critical infrastructure, stealing secrets.
All of the above.
Yep.
Sophisticated, state-sponsored hacking on a global scale. The kind of stuff that can have massive geopolitical consequences. It's a reminder of the immense, often hidden power wielded in the cyber domain by governments.
Wow. Okay, so from that high-level state-sponsored hacking, let's bring it back down to something more personal but just as critical.
Yeah.
Our own data, especially medical data.
Right. And the source who read about HIPAA violations sounded genuinely appalled.
HIPAA, that's the U.S. law, protecting our health info, right? Medical history, test results, all that sensitive stuff.
Exactly. And a violation means that Incredibly private data could be exposed. It's a goldmine for identity thieves, fraudsters. It could even be used for blackmail or discrimination.
Hmm.
The sensitivity makes it a prime target.
And the consequences of attacks on healthcare aren't just financial or reputational. They can be fatal.
That was a terrifying point made. Hackers deploying ransomware that are killing.
You mean literally people dying because of cyber attacks on hospitals?
Yes, we've seen it happen. Ransomware locks up hospital systems. They can't access patient records. Critical equipment might fail. Surgeries get canceled. Ambulances diverted.
So treatment gets delayed or is impossible.
Exactly. And those delays, that chaos, can directly lead to patient deaths. It turns a digital attack into a real-world life-and-death crisis. It's not just about data anymore.
And the attack surface is growing, isn't it? It's not just hospital networks, it's devices, even things inside us.
That's a huge concern. The source highlighted medical devices that are Bluetooth, that are implants, pacemakers, insulin pumps, things connected wirelessly.
And also just the broader Internet of Things, IoT in our homes, smart thermostats, cameras.
All potentially vulnerable. The example given was chillingly simple. Someone hacking your smart thermostat and cranking the heat up in the middle of the night.
Okay, that's creepy and potentially dangerous.
It illustrates the point perfectly. Malicious actors could potentially gain control over our immediate environment, even devices physically connected to our bodies. The number of potential entry points for hackers is just exploding.
So given all that,
Yeah.
you can understand why some people might say, you know what, I'll stick with the old tech.
Absolutely. The source mentioned this preference for old technology to avoid these risks that come with convenience.
It makes you question, doesn't it? Because everything really need to be smart, need to be connected.
It's a valid question. If the convenience comes with these huge risks, life-threatening risks, privacy invasion, constant vulnerability, maybe we need to be more selective, more cautious about what we connect.
And this ties directly into another massive issue, encryption.
The encryption dilemma,
Yeah.
a major point of friction.
The sources mentioned this worry that authorities or someone wanted to not allow encryption, basically weaken or ban strong encryption.
Which is a fundamental threat. Encryption is what protects everything: online messages, finances, legal documents, and that medical data we were just talking about.
It's the basis of digital security and privacy.
Completely. If you weaken it, you put in backdoors for government access, well, criminals will find those backdoors too. It makes everyone vulnerable. Any notion of real online privacy just disappears.
So if the current systems feel vulnerable and encryption itself might be under threat,
Yeah.
people start looking for alternatives, right?
Naturally. There's this clear desire for communication methods that feel more secure, more trustworthy, because faith in the existing platforms is, well, shaky for some.
They mentioned trying a Jabber server for texting.
Yeah, an attempt using an open source messaging system. But it failed because not enough people used it, which highlights the challenge. You can have great secure tech, but getting widespread adoption is hard.
But the idea of building alternatives persists, like decentralized networks.
Exactly. Really creative, grassroots ideas, like hooking up a bunch of Wi-Fi devices to create local mesh networks.
And using a Pringles can antenna. Serious?
Yeah. A Pringles can with a Yagi antenna, it's a classic DIY way to boost Wi-Fi range. It sounds a bit MacGyver, but it shows real ingenuity. People finding ways to build independent communication links if they feel the main channels are compromised or controlled.
Taking back control in a way.
Yeah, building resilience from the ground up.
And looking beyond local networks, satellite communication came up too.
Right. Things like Starlink, providing internet from space, or Apple integrating satellite features into phones. T-Mobile potentially partnering for calls anywhere.
Sounds a bit sci-fi almost.
Maybe. And the source acknowledged it might sound paranoid, but the argument was these aren't paranoid times. Given the threats, the lack of trust, maybe this kind of thinking, planning for resilient alternative comms, is actually just prudent, necessary even.
Thinking ahead, okay, what about AI? That's the other huge tech topic.
Huge. And it cuts both ways, right? The sources acknowledge the practical power of AI for just sorting through data, like a super-powered database, amazing for analysis, finding patterns.
But then there's the dark side, the really ominous potential.
The digital information twin of fake information.
That sounds bad. What does it mean?
Imagine AI creating fake news, fake social media profiles, even fake people voice video history that are so convincing you just can't tell they're fake.
Like deepfakes on steroids.
Exactly. But potentially entire fake narratives generated automatically, spread algorithmically, it completely undermines our ability to know what's real. It ties back to those alternative realities, but supercharged by AI.
That's a genuinely terrifying prospect for society. How do you function if you can't trust anything you see or hear online?
It's a massive challenge, and interestingly, the source mentioned a rumor, unverified, about friction within the AI world itself. Microsoft and OpenAI fight going to court.
Oh, like conflict between the major players.
Yeah, even if it's just a rumor, it hints at the instability, the power struggles, the high stakes involved in this incredibly powerful, rapidly developing technology. It's not all smooth sailing.
So amidst all this high-tech threat and potential, there was also a more human touch, right? About just losing touch online.
Yeah, it was quite poignant, mentioning losing track of friends, Paul, Stewie, Queen Amy, Sharky Ray, people they knew in online spaces.
It highlights how fragile those digital connections can sometimes be.
It does. Platforms change, accounts get deleted, people just drift away in the noise. It's a reminder that these online communities, while powerful, aren't always permanent. We need reliable ways to stay connected, maybe even backup methods. It brings a human element to all this talk of networks and protocols.
Okay. Wow, that was
Yeah.
quite a journey through all that material.
It really covered a lot of ground, didn't it?
From the deeply personal, like that divorce case, right through to, well, state-level cyber warfare with TAO and the future of AI.
And seeing how it all connects, how personal struggles get tangled up with digital tools, online narratives, government actions.
Yeah, and how technology is this double-edged sword. Incredible opportunities, connection, but also these profound risks,
What?
vulnerabilities.
Manipulation, surveillance, those life or death ransomware attacks we discussed. It's clear the digital world isn't just for convenience anymore. It's a real battleground.
A battleground for information, privacy, maybe even for truth itself.
That feels like the core theme, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That search for truth is just getting harder and harder.
Especially with AI potentially creating those digital twins of fake information. How do you even begin to navigate that?
It means critical thinking, media literacy, maybe even some technical savvy. These aren't niche skills anymore. They're essential survival skills for navigating modern reality.
So as we wrap up, maybe the thought to leave everyone with is, well, in this world, right, so connected, yet also seemingly so fractured.
Where information is a weapon and trust seems to be eroding.
How do you, listening right now, figure out what's real? How do you protect yourself online, your data, your privacy?
And maybe even bigger picture, how do we all contribute to building something better? More resilient communities, more trustworthy systems, online and off.
Because the challenge isn't just knowing about this stuff, is it? It's about acting on it, thinking critically,
Yeah.
making informed choices.
Trying to shape the kind of digital future we actually want to live in, that's the real task ahead.